clinical psychologist, and I was investigating a cognitive therapy program for panic attacks in the late 70s. What I was finding is that there was something about the way they were expressing emotions which was unusual, and I realized that there wasn't a decent scale around for emotions, nothing on emotional processing.
Emotional processing is how we come to terms with emotionally salient negative events in our lives, anything from a minor hassle to a major trauma, or they could be chronic stressors such as having ongoing financial worries or experiencing bullying in the workplace.
Emotional processing is a type of natural healing, almost like a second immune system protecting us from emotional distress. Not everybody processes events successfully. There are some elements that would hinder processing.
I've been working with Roger since 1996 and we've been developing the emotional processing work since then. Developing a scale like this, questionnaire scale, is very much a multidisciplinary endeavour.
I've been working with Roger and Peter for many years now. I think it's around about 15 years. With my background in cognitive psychology and an interest in statistics and psychometrics, it made sense for me to join the core team for the EPS development.
At first, I thought that emotional processing was just something that was common to panic attacks. But then I realised, well, it applies to nearly every psychiatric condition, and people started to do research in migraine and emotional processing and somatization and fibromyalgia and cancer and more physical or psychogenic conditions, until really there was the dawning realization, well, actually this is a very broad concept and made us think a bit differently about emotional processing.
So we're currently collaborating on an exciting project with the UK MS Society and Swansea University's Multiple Sclerosis Register.
So we developed a program, a fatigue management program for people with MS, and now we moved to a stage where we want to understand a bit more about how the intervention actually works.
The scale's been translated into about 13 different languages. It seems to be relevant to cultural and other aspects too. And of course, it can be applied with healthy, normal people who want just to improve their style of processing. They just want a more healthy, more fulfilled life. We've been through a process of iteration, so several stages of improving it and producing better versions.
We were keen to make it practical and easy to use, and so we have reduced the number of items down to 25, but we were careful not to compromise on the psychometric robustness of the tool.
They measure the way in which a person deals with the situation and the hindrances to dealing with the situation.
And in the end, we've statistically come up with 5 different subscales.
And we're constantly surprised at the different uses. It gives us the sense that this is something with a very wide application. In clinical psychology, we do actually think of different disorders. This requires a shift in thinking. There's an emotional factor present across the board in psychological disorders. The emotional processing scale is the only scale which brings many dimensions together. That's what I'm saying, pan-diagnostic. It is not fixed to a disorder. For instance, the patient I saw recently was doing very well in her life. She was coping okay. It was only when she had a mugging that she started to develop post-traumatic stress symptoms, nightmares and flashbacks, and her scores on emotion processing scale were extremely high. So the style had been there before. It had not caused much problems in her life. Now, faced with trauma, it just was not a style that was able to deal with this. The therapy is quite difficult. It's based on prolonged exposure, a very successful procedure. She would have to face emotions and talk about them in great detail, and this would be painful and distressing, but ultimately, the more she talked, the more she would get over them. And the emotional processing scale was one part of this, because I was able to show her her profile sheet where she was as high as you could get on many dimensions. This helped to get home to her the importance of expressing emotions. She has actually changed her style entirely now. She's gone through the 2 traumas and doing exceptionally well. And not just a change in her PTSD symptoms, which now she could no longer be diagnosed as that, but also almost a lifestyle change. So this should almost protect her from future problems because she'll deal with them in a different way, and she can see now how significant that is.
Emotions are part of the human experience and sort of interest to everyone, so the scale and the idea of emotional processing has really wide implications.
It's got relevance in therapeutic applications as well as in research in healthcare settings, and also I think it's got potential in business and contexts such as sport as well.
When you think about it, we all have to process emotions. Life will present all sorts of difficulties and stresses and strains to everybody. So we do need to be able to deal with this. So it's actually something that applies across the board. There's no person that it wouldn't apply to.